Everyone's hanging in. All right, great. So I started working in manganese as a postdoc. I was handed a manuscript by my mentor. And beforehand, I was a lead girl. I did lead. I was looking at lead and I wanted to do prevention, and I just couldn't believe that kids were still being exposed to lead and suffering the consequences when we knew what caused it and that we could remedy the situation by removing them from that environment. And I was well on my way. But he handed me this manuscript, and it was all about this new mineral metal that I hadn't been exposed to yet called manganese. I was like, what is this? What is this manganese? What does it do? The paper was on infant formula and hair concentrations, and then how well the babies performed early in life on cognitive function. That was the manuscript. It was an old paper, but it just caught me like, wow, we could be exposing babies to manganese in their infant formula, and then it could have a health impact later. It just was a shock. So I started looking into manganese. And now I'll tell you what I've found briefly in this event. And we also have a big study that's now going on, and part of it's here in your town. So we thought it would be great to share the stage tonight with one of your own who's deep in the partnership of this new initiative. So manganese. What's the deal with it? It's a nutrient. It's a mineral. Maybe you ate something out there today that had lettuce or the rice. I can't remember if you had a pineapple, tea. You have 1 cup of tea, and that's your daily dose. That's all the amount that you need in your body. But don't worry, you can have as much tea as you want. I have glass after glass. You can eat all the vegetables you want, and it's wonderful for you. The body has an amazing way of removing everything that you don't need from the diet that you eat. So if you overeat manganese, that's the only thing you can overeat and not have to worry about it. Ice cream, on the other hand, I can't tell you that it'll just all go away, unfortunately. But there's this other side to the mineral. I'm not going to say a negative yet because it's essential for our modern lives. Manganese comes up from the earth. It's mined in mines, and then it's brought. The United States does have some mines, but then it's brought to a smelter where it's refined into a mineral and a metal that it's used for industry, such as our batteries, welding rods. It's in fungicides. It's a key ingredient. Steel making, steelers. Here we are. Manganese is essential for your football team, perhaps. The Bengals should know that, so they can maybe take advantage of that weakness. That Superman weakness. We found it. Okay, don't go back and tell them. It doesn't matter. They're going to lose anyway. It's on the recording. Okay. But what's key about manganese, if you and thinking about this mineral and knowing that the body is able to remove and clear it out from when you eat it, that's in the gut. So they did the animal studies, and they found that only 3 to 5% of what you eat actually is absorbed. There has never been a case of manganese deficiency. There's never a deficiency unless they intentionally starved animals or deprived them from their diet. That's never been a case, and never a human case of manganese deficiency. But potentially it could exist if they did not have any in their diet. But then, what's the hazard with it? At the far end of the spectrum of manganese, there were declines in health, and it was first identified in the miners. Those men who were mining the manganese, and this is in Morocco. This is a Moroccan miner, and one of the doctor's assistants is standing next to him. You can see he has a cane. His feet are twisted. His legs are bent. When this individual, I've actually seen movies, they documented the testing of these individuals. They would even have them stand and then just lightly push on them, and they would fall over. They could not keep their balance. So the manganese was having an effect on their ability to stand, maintain balance. It also messed with their mind in ways that they had hallucinations, uncontrollable laughing, uncontrollable crying, mood disorders. So they called it manganese madness. And so it has a slight Parkinson-like with the motor function component, but it's beyond Parkinson's disease. And that's an overt, extreme occupational exposure for years. This poor fellow had that. But then but he was breathing it. So manganese can enter into the body if you're mining it or if you're exposed to the fine particle, not in food. And it can go into your lungs and then into your bloodstream, circulate to your brain. Or you can breathe it and it can go directly. I was amazed when I was reading David Dorman's work. He's in North Carolina and he exposed rats to manganese and he found that it traveled when they were breathing through their nose, through their olfactory nerve. The nerve that allows you to smell particles, was transporting the manganese directly to the brain. I thought that was fascinating. But we don't know. There's a lot we don't know about manganese. And one thing we don't know is when does that level become great and good and all wonderful start to go down? We don't know that. I wish we did. It would be great, but we don't. And you can see how hard it would be to study this mineral, because it has two sides, two faces. Well, how do you know that's the good manganese? Is there a good and a bad manganese, or is it all in your? We're still trying to figure this out. So that's why I love research. So I met this community. During my postdoc, he had my senior mentor. I was given the opportunity to go to a community meeting with a community group who was wanting to know more about their manganese exposure, and they lived near a refinery in Marietta, Ohio. So this is the longest running manganese refinery in all of North America. United States and Canada combined. This is the longest running refinery. It shares our river. It's in Marietta, Ohio, beautiful historic town. It's beautiful to go there. I love Marietta. And the community group there was very concerned about their potential exposure. And then what does it do? This was in 2006. I met them. And no one had worked with them. There had been no real research studies in partnership with the community. I wanted to show you a picture of the group. This was on the day that we happened to meet. They have a group called Neighbors for Clean Air. And they had concern. There was the internet at the time, so they could go online and they could see the welding lawsuits from welders using, had laced, manganese in the welding rods. They saw lawsuits online. They read about the miners. They knew occupational hazards. But they're like, well, what does it do for our children? So we had several meetings. We had many, many phone calls. And so it was great that the community had a concern and that they could pair it with science. So when we met with the community, we had one large group meeting at one point. And I said, if you could conduct a study, if you could do research here in your town, what would be your questions? Because every good scientist knows research starts with a question. And it's all about your question. So we had all those flip sheets, and we had about 10 or more flip sheets going. And these are just two of them. I thought that their questions were remarkable. If you had scientists all sitting in a room, I don't know that they would even be as good. Why? Because this is the public. They were living it. They were experiencing it. They had thought about this for a long time. Their main question was, does manganese affect cognitive development of our children? That was their question. We wrote it down, but that came out of that was in our conversation. They had questions about how does it affect seniors, older people in their community. Does it have behavior problems? Is it found in our food, water, milk? What about the apple orchard up the street? What about the cow farm, the dairy? They had great questions. So we had to start somewhere. This was one community group. And if you're going to do a really large research study, you'd have to have a lot of numbers. So I wanted to know, is it just this one little group's concern and issue? Or if we did something big, would they all come out? Would this be an embraced, did the whole community share this concern? So with them, we partnered and did a large community-wide survey. And this is just one table just to show you a flavor of some questions we asked. Local environmental concern. We had air, water, soil. Smell was a big thing. They came up frequently. They would drive past the plant and smell things. And then we even just threw in, okay, manganese. Are you interested in manganese? We asked, are you very concerned, or slightly? And you can see the vast majority of people, even in this community-wide, almost 300 people survey, were very concerned about exposure. Not as much about manganese, but surprisingly, I thought it was high. 77% were concerned about manganese. So, what did we do? Well, I brought the science piece. They brought the community piece. And I love this as a great example of how academics work with community partners, because their expertise was absolutely critical for the conduct of this study. They brought all their resources together for this, not dollars, but resources in terms of the knowledge of the community, what would be the best approach to reach the target audience, what age group, and I didn't do this alone. I had a team of scientists with me, and we designed this research study. So we named it. The name was very important. They didn't want toxic air kills kids as the name of their research study. I don't know why. I thought it was a great name. No. No, I never would have thought of that one. But it was a historic town with tourism. They didn't want a negative connotation, and I completely agreed with that. So actually, we called the study Marietta Community Actively Researching Exposure Study, or Marietta Cares. So it's the Marietta Cares study, and I think that's great. And the logo, I didn't put a picture of it, but it's a kite. It's very kid-friendly. If we were going to recruit children, we wanted to have the image of kids with air, so it was a nice kite study. So for science, we had to choose another comparison community. And Cambridge is a town about 40 minutes above Marietta with no known manganese in their environment, and a socioeconomically similar Appalachian community. That's the key piece too. Appalachians are different than non-Appalachians. So I wanted to keep apples to apples as much as possible. So the mom had to live in the community since we made a statement of 16 weeks of pregnancy. We wanted to see what the of that child being exposed in utero throughout their lifetime. Even though we were going to start collecting information on the child at 7, 8, 9, that was our target age, we wanted to know, we didn't want one kid who moved in there a few weeks ago or a year ago. We wanted long-term chronic exposure. If you're really going to know impact, you need to look long-term. Ideally, we would have started recruiting pregnant moms, but that would have taken more years to have the kids grow up. And this community had waited long enough. So we started, but recruitment criteria. Okay, it says there's a problem with audio capture. I'll just say ignore, maybe. Oops. Oops, did I do something on that? Okay. Now I don't see my slide. So I'll just look this. The other component was looking at the environment. So if you're going to look at exposure and health, you have to have a measure of exposure. So we set up a stationary air sampling device. In the community, we had kids wear backpacks with personal air sampling devices labeled on them. Thank you. That collected air particles, and we looked for manganese in that. We also had a team. We trained local community members to go out into the homes of all of our participants after they visited us or the clinic. They went into their home and collected dust in the home. We wanted soil at the home. Some homes we collected water. We wanted just to get a good idea of the water distribution systems, but those were big pieces. Then the most important part, I think, are the biomarkers. So you can know what's in the environment, but that doesn't really matter until you know what's in the body, what actually got in. You can be exposed or around something all day, but if it doesn't get into you, it doesn't count. It has to get into your body for it to make a difference. So we looked at exposure biomarkers, we call them, We measured manganese and other neurotoxicants. So you can't, if you're going to measure if you want to know the impact of one neurotoxicant or something that might be affecting the brain, you have to look at other ones that are already known. So another well-known neurotoxicant was lead. Yes. Can you think of another one in the Appalachian region that would be a significant factor? That if we didn't include, we'd be really missing the boat.
Smoking.
Tobacco, yes. And I almost forgot to add it. I was, just almost forgot. And then at the end, we're like, oh my gosh, we forgot to put tobacco in this. That would have been disastrous. We added a measure of cotinine. So cotinine is the metabolite of nicotine. So if someone's been exposed to secondhand tobacco, or even firsthand if you're smoking it, nicotine metabolizes to cotinine, and then you can measure that in the body. So it's not just self-reported. We did do self-reported for a parent. I bet it was funny. They didn't match. The reported values did not match what we measured in the kit. Nope, no smokers here. Well, this kid's got quite a bit of cotinine in their body. Not all had that. I thought that'd be a nice little paper on honesty for parents. That would be good. One child, one story, he came into the clinic, and his serum cotinine had the measure of an active smoker. And this was a 7, 8, and 9. I'm like, no, he can't. This child's not smoking, because that's just, that's too young. What season was this? What season was this? This was winter. The child was in the car driving from Cambridge, which is 40 minutes away, in the car with the smoking family member, one for 40 minutes. So he had the level in his body of an active smoker just from, we think, riding in the car for a 40-minute car ride. Isn't that amazing? I don't think about tobacco smoke as such an impact, but it really is. We're not afraid of tobacco smoke because it's so common, but it really does have an impact on our health. And as we go through these data, I'll show you some things about IQ, but we're just now looking at school achievement, and the leading factor is not manganese in this case, it's tobacco. It's the secondhand smoke affecting the kids' achievement in school. So even though we get all good sense, I need a cigarette. Let's think about it again. Let's think twice, because it is impacting not just ourselves, but those who are around it. The other measure I wanted to tell you about is the naturally deciduous baby teeth. So these are baby teeth. Baby teeth are so cool. When a child is forming, when we all formed in our mother's womb, the teeth begin to form at that point. And actually they start at the 16th week, and that's why I chose that date. 16 weeks is when the teeth start forming. So the teeth are forming, and they start absorbing chemicals, minerals, everything into that tooth. When you're born, you don't come out with teeth. They're still under the gums. But as your teeth are forming, when you're born, there's something called a birth line. There's an actual line. If you dissected your tooth like a tree ring, you could see a line inside your tooth that was the moment that you were born. Wow. And then that opens up a world of science, because now you can measure in that baby tooth. If you do something called laser ablation, go right through the tooth, pull it out like a tree ring. This great, wonderful scientist in Mount Sinai is doing this. His name's Manish Arora, and he can measure then in utero exposure and then postnatal exposure up 1 year of life. It's incredible. So we have this ability to do this. We haven't measured those yet because it's about $500 a tooth, but we'll get there. We'll get another grant and then be able to do those measures. And then we looked at outcome. So we hired a wonderful woman from the community, Jody Alden, who measured child IQ. We also did motor function. We looked at their finger tapping, their ability to move, dexterity, everything we could think of that could be an early indicator of an issue with the brain functions. We knew we would never see the extreme side of the minors, but what are those early small things The things also that a doctor, when you go into a health clinic, they don't look for those. These are called subclinical. They're not something you present with at a physician's office. But we wanted to look for them. Oh, oops. So one of the key pieces for the community, they wanted to know where, how far the manganese went. There was a monitor in their town, but modeling was a great way to show them what the exposures and the concentrations looked like. So we used the EPA has an air mod monitor, or air mod modeling. It's for dispersion modeling. And you can see the concentrations are very high around the facility. This was by a student, PhD student. She did this great work. And we looked at the schools nearby, and then all those little dots are where the children lived. So in the very heart of the town, Marietta, the exposures weren't as high as they were surrounding the plant and then along the river. But there was a school right in a zone where it was the exposures were quite high. That school is now closed, so no kids go there any longer, which I find that's good. But now we're able to pinpoint exactly what those exposures were. So I'd love to go back in time and look at the residential history, where those kids lived when they were born, match it with the tooth. You know, you can see all the exciting things that we will be doing in the future. And as I was talking with Rachel and Sue here at GASP, one of the questions were, well, where does it come from, the manganese? Or how do you know it's from the air or the soil or the dust? So the other piece that we looked at was, okay, here's at the bottom is hair manganese, the amount that got into the child's, and you can measure it in hair. We looked at factors, and these are the ones that were most important. Time outside, being outside was a key indicator with the amount found in the dust in the house. Soil manganese influenced the dust in the home. And all of those factors, and the air manganese also influenced dust in the home, and that had an impact on the hair concentration. So all of those factors then fed into, wasn't just the breathing of it from being outside, but it was even the soil and the dust in the house. Because when you're outside, you know, you do track things in. We wear shoes and we move them into the house, and we don't see the dust on our dirt on our feet, but it's there. It gets into the home and then it recirculates, etc. But that did have an impact on the concentration in the kids' hair. This was on a subset of our study participants, only 1 year, and we want to do that for everybody now at the next phase. But I wanted to emphasize the importance of even the measure of soil. Soil can be highly related to the amount we find in the hair. In a study in Italy, so Italy, now I'm not the only one who's done this work. In fact, Roberto Lucchini has done more than we have in Italy. Our study is the only one in the United States looking at manganese, the only pediatric manganese exposed cohort in the US, which I think is pretty cool. And we keep growing too. But this is an Italian study, and he had an industrialized area. He looked at soil in the homes of kids, and then he measured their motor function. So I wanted to show you what their results looked like, because it was kind of cool. And I know this is a sciencey slide, but you guys are super smart. I know you can read this, because I'm not. I have to figure this out too. When I read this, like, okay, tell me what these mean. So if you look at the dots, those are all the participants, and the line in the middle, the blue line, is where the data fall. So as you can see, the line is going high, then it goes down. And those are the soil concentrations are headed as it goes, the higher soil goes that way. And then this Nebraska. Thank you, Nancy, for pointing. The Luria, Nebraska on this side, and that's the motor test. So the worse scores, as the scores went down, the higher concentration of soil. So the kids that were exposed to higher levels of manganese in their soil had poor motor function skills. That's all they looked at. So that just again reiterated the importance of dirt. Dirt is key. Another a soil comparison. We have soil levels. These are like concentrations when the EPA says, "Okay, that's enough." We are now approaching Chicago, and they've had manganese is a hot topic right now. Chicago has some issues. They're in the news quite frequently. So Chicago EPA did some sampling there, and that's the mean concentration. East Liverpool, right across the river, not too far away. That's one of theirs. And then there's in Italy, where Roberto found the impact with coordination was lower than we found in they found in East Liverpool. So we will definitely be looking into that. Okay, let's go back out of the dirt, out of the playground, into the IQ. This is Jody. She's giving the test. In fact, this is her daughter. She was a practice participant. The IQ test is a very standard measure for kids. It's great, and Jody did an excellent job. Not only did we look at the IQ, 'cause we also have to include other things like what's mom's IQ. You know that the primary caregiver's IQ is related to the child's IQ. So it doesn't matter. I mean, it's more important than what their education level. Education is very key, and you can use that as a surrogate. But mom or primary caregiver IQ is very important on the child's IQ. Also their age, the sex of the child, the race, birth weight. We asked moms to recall birth weight. Whether or not they were in the ICU, the intensive care unit at birth, was the key piece. Tobacco smoke. We had lead and other metals in there also. Whether or not they rented and owned, and that was based primarily on lead exposure as an indicator. Most rented homes are lead. And then also income. So those are the other pieces that we were able to put into this model. So again, a complex kind of figure, but I'm going to walk you through it, and I know you're going to get it. So does this look familiar? This is what our data ended up looking like. And it just was remarkably familiar to the picture I showed earlier about that inverted U. It was that where you have a deficiency or low levels of manganese, and then you have high, and they're both causing a negative outcome. We saw the same thing with our children in Marietta and Cambridge. We pulled them all together, and we found with hair and blood, so we measured this in their body, the level in their body, if they had too low manganese or if they had too high, they had lower IQ. So too little of it in their body wasn't good, and also too much. So we're back to now, I'm like, okay, this is really cool. What a great picture. But what's the end? Like, what's the level that's safe or not safe? And we still don't know that yet, but we keep going. But our data are ringing true with what we know about the essentialness of manganese and also how it's neurotoxic. So then I'm at East Liverpool. They have another facility that doesn't emit manganese directly out of a stack. It's stored along the river. Again, I love river towns. They're highly industrialized, but we all share the river, so it's a nice connection. So once I learned about East Liverpool and of their manganese concentrations, because it was very high, we wanted to do the same study. I was limited on funding, so we couldn't do the full expanse of environmental measures. So we just relied on EPA and their monitor. But we dove right into the biomarkers, recruited the kids the same way, same criteria, so we could have everything consistent and eventually pool them all together. So we had the East Liverpool Care Study. And on child IQ, that was the top line, full-scale IQ, we'll just hang in with that one. It was significant with higher hair. So the higher hair concentrations, lower IQ. We did not see that beautiful upside-down curve, probably because we had like 100 kids in East Liverpool, and really to see that big spread, you have to have quite a few. So we didn't see it, I think, because of the numbers. That paper actually won one of the papers of the year by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. I was amazed that I thought that first paper would be the best, like, inverted U, beautiful. But this one won one of the papers of the year. So I was glad that manganese made it to the top of interest for NIEHS. So the partnership was absolutely essential. We showed that both low and high can be, this are the take homes, low and high can be, have a negative impact. And then also further, we need to know more about that air exposure, because I want to be able to help address, or at least give agencies the ability to know what level in the air becomes toxic, because we don't know that answer. There's ideas, it's not concrete. But without the community's involvement, we wouldn't have been able to do any of it. And it's the beauty of collaboration. So the next study that we're launching into, and we have Nancy here tonight who's going to talk about the imaging. But now our kids, the kids in our CARES cohort, they're adolescents. And we all know crazy things go on in the brain of adolescents. They just are all over the place. There's a lot going on. It's a understudied group of kids. So actually, when we asked the community, who should we study? We asked that on the survey. There was a huge number of people wanted kids. Huge number of people said elderly. Barely anybody said adolescents. Nobody said kids, like that poor little age group. Probably because nobody likes them. They're crazy. I know. I have two adolescents, teenagers right now, and they get under your skin sometimes, but I love them dearly. This is on the record. I love them dearly. But we're going to study, again, we're bringing them back in. We're going to look at the metals again. We're going to look at their tobacco. We're now asking them if they smoke, because now it definitely is a possibility, or e-cigarettes, or vaping, or Juuls, all that stuff. Oh, that's a scary one. Also, adolescent behavior, attention, risk-taking. We're looking again at their balance, again at their gait. I didn't show you the balance data. But we did measure that in those kids. But now the cool and most innovative part of this, because we know manganese is having an impact in the brain, is that we're bringing them here. They're coming, instead of going to Cincinnati, it's too far. We partnered with the University of Pittsburgh Children's Hospital, and we're doing imaging, which is great. And now we're going to hear about what we're planning. We don't have the data yet to share with you, but at least you can see some of the cool things we're going to be looking at. After Nancy. And then these are the acknowledgments of all the great people that have been a part of this, and all the labs. So it's not just me. Okay, great.
So we're going to have everybody come up at the end to answer questions, but if there is one question you're just burning to ask right now, so you don't forget it, is there any questions right now that anyone would like to ask Erin?
Has anyone posited, or does anyone know if an individual has taken in, or wherever the manganese settles, binds, whatever it does, do we know whether or not there's any way to unbind it?
Great question. So in a way, yes, but not all the way. So manganese is a nutrient, have to have it. It's in the mix with other nutrients. Iron, for instance. Iron and manganese compete for absorption sites. So if you have high levels of iron in your diet, you may not get as much manganese binding because iron's taking its spot. But if you have low iron, you could have more manganese binding because iron's not there. So manganese is going to jump on. Or maybe zinc or other minerals. They kind of compete all together, and if they have, there's all these binding sites, and then they all jump on. But if you take their seat, they can't sit there. Kicking it off, I don't know.
Does it matter how high it is with its competitors up the chemical line where it sits on the chart?
I'd have to look into that question. But manganese, I'll talk about where it goes, and it does stay in iron-rich areas, let's say in the brain, the globus pallidus, the caudate putamen, areas that are rich in iron. It seeks those areas and stays. It has a short half-life in blood, very short half-life, but we also know it goes into bone, and it can recirculate. So I'm more concerned about air exposure to manganese than diet. Let's say diet can be eliminated. It's bound to it's bound to fibrous things, and the body just excretes it. But inhaled manganese, it's transported attached to proteins, but it can also be free. Free manganese might be a bigger concern than a manganese attached to something else, because then it's all by itself potentially causing havoc. Great question. I do have one bonus slide. Maybe I'll show you that one. It's a comparison of the air monitors from all the towns and yours. I think you'd want to see that one, right? Okay. This is EPA data. So just to familiarize yourself, these lines are EPA and ATSDR. They each have, our federal agencies each have their own standard for manganese in the air. I hope, and I talk to them each individually, like, you guys know you have two standards, and how's the public supposed to understand this? What are we going to do with this? So there's some talk. They might come together and find one that are all just different. So this is the ATSDR, and this is EPA. The U are the green. So, you're right at where the EPA says is a rough spot. East Liverpool is the blue. And the orange zone is southeast side Chicago. That's where we're just now starting. We're going to do a southeast side Chicago CARES cohort coming up early next year. We have the funds and we're ready to launch. So there's your data. We could talk about that later. Okay. And show.